Well, surprisingly, the Theosophical Society has many of its members seem to be associated with Freemasonry. And Freemasonry, well, it's not clear to me, but I think has an understanding that the gods of the various world religions are all the same God with a different name. And, well, in a way, that's right. You see, if you look at the Old Testament God, you go back to early times, it's indistinguishable from Baal, the Canaanite God, you see. I mean, the Hebrew clearly is into sacrifice, and Abraham's going to sacrifice his son at one point, and he's convinced that angels told him to do it. I mean, according to the story. And of course, the character of the God of the Hebrew is a warring, well, dangerous God. Of course, if you find such a God to be attractive, well, that's your God. And devotion to such, as I understand it, should lead you to find out the truth of the matter. I mean, it's not the best way. I would have thought just study of the Jesus story might appeal Jesus, God, rather more. But not perfectly. It won't be your God. Personification of your values, as you understand it. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. See, in a way, a nation that's having to defend its borders, especially a buffer state, well, is it the case that the ideal leader of such does actually believe in a war god? Because he's going to have to go to war. He's going to want God on his side. I mean, in as far as he and the state are effectively the same mind. I mean, the state doesn't have a mind, does it? But I mean, it is the mind of the leaders in a way, isn't it? I think of the American Constitution. I mean, it's founded by Freemasons in some considerable measure. And well, their God would have been appropriate to trying to free itself from British Empire, originally. And America, like Britain, spends a great time of it, well, a lot of its time and resources, in being at war, rather more than some countries. Although perhaps the whole concept of the individuality and the sovereignty of the state may require a value system that is willing to go to war. Else you'd be absorbed into one of the states that is like that. Yes. The world seems to be like that, doesn't it? I pray not for the world, but for those whom thou hast given me out of the world. For they are thine, by which I take it to mean thine of the same character as you. They've rejected the world system in some fundamental way. They're rejecting the trap that the world falls into. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. See, probably the root of it is Persia. But the gods, whether it's Kali or Jehovah, or Baal, are nature gods. They have the attributes of creation and destruction. You know, you go to eat food, you pick it off the tree while you, in some sense, harm. And the fruit's designed to feed you so that you carry the seed. You may munch up the seed, of course. If you decide to grow a crop, you clear the weeds, you dig the soil. In other words, you kill the plants and the creatures that may get disturbed. If you have a household, you defend it. The nation defends itself. And to build it, you may clear to do that. You know, what happened to the previous inhabitants, whether they were human or just of the animal kingdom. The gods of man were nature gods. Now, I think the essence of the Jesus story is not that. It's a rejection of the world. It's a statement that my kingdom is not of this world. It's very much focused on heaven. It's not actually the Old Testament or Revelation story of millennial times on earth. In John 17, the prayer of Jesus for us is about now, that they be with me where I am. They're sent into this world, not to transform the world system, but that people may realize the kingdom of heaven's within them. They're born of God. He's our heavenly dad. In that sense, you see, Marcion, who probably wrote the first gospel, which is possibly something like what we've got of Mark, he's got it right. That the God that the Hebrew is worshipping, well, it's not his God by the looks of it. If he wrote something like the Gospels. You see, from the point of view of survival in this world, turning the other cheek, non-violence and so on, is not a long-run strategy. What we value, you see, is not of this world. It's where war and violence and death is no more. I mean, whether such a domain exists, called heaven, or not, that is what we value. Except when it comes to survival in this world. Now, when Jesus prays that his followers, us, are kept from the evil, it's not clear he means physical harm, because he doesn't see remaining in this world as necessary for the believer. What's necessary for the believer is to be with Jesus where he is, which is in an eternal kingdom, which you can enter into now, but the physical body does not. While you're in the physical body, you can be in it. But it's you that's in it. And in a sense, he's saying that the kingdom of heaven's within the physical body, or at least he means within in some sense. But it's pretty clear that the view is that the kingdom is everlasting of God, whereas the body clearly isn't, the physical body. And so we're very clear with someone like Paul, as a Gnostic, I mean, not Paul as a founder of the church, the Christian church, which is probably more Roman than Pauline. Clear in case of Paul, his idea of resurrection is not physical body. It's a spiritual body, an eternal body that we're resurrected with. In other words, the literal resurrection of Jesus in physical form wouldn't have satisfied Paul's expectation at all. We are not raised carnally, we are raised spiritually. Hence Marcion cites Paul as the great Gnostic of the age, which Marcion no doubt feels he's, in some sense, the completion of the upgrade on Paul. And the upgrade on Paul is Jesus. And it may well be that Paul is, in fact, a spiritual write-up of a man named Apollonius, who seems to have travelled the Mediterranean and done much of what Paul is supposed to have done in his life. In other words, Paul, too, may not be terribly historical, except in the form of Apollonius. And the earlier writings, or the more reliable writings that are attributed to Paul as such, seem to predate Jesus. So that Jesus is, from Marcion's point of view, a rather better illustration than Paul of what Marcion's getting at in the Jesus story. Of course, though, when you come to John's Gospel, we have an upgrade on the synoptics. In other words, the John's Gospel, the Johannine Gospel, is very Gnostic. And the Jesus story, as in the other three Gospels, the synoptics, is probably a rewrite, a Roman rewrite in effect. In effect, by the time you finish the editing of Marcion's Gospel. And of course we supposedly get Luke's Gospel linked to Acts of the Apostles, which is possibly not really about the apostles, but Paul, according to what the Roman view of Paul chooses to be. The Gnostic literature is all but obliterated by the persecution of the Gnostic Church by the Roman Church down the ages. Literature burned and Gnostics murdered on a much bigger scale than ever there was of the Romans persecuting the early church. In total only amounted to something like a 5-year period. It's been horrendously exaggerated in the interests of latter theologians of the Christian faith. But by the grace of God we have even so enough evidence from various document finds and so on, and even analysis of what is officially accepted as the canon, to recognize something of the truth of the matter. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.